In this video, we're going to be looking at burnout. So first of all, let's look at the definition of burnout. In other words, what is burnout? The definition states that burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. So let's quickly evaluate these three terms. First of all, emotional. Emotional refers to a state where you are so tired that you can no longer regulate your emotions. Remember, our brain regulates our emotions. In other words, our brain keeps us relatively happy, for a lack of a better definition. But if you're so tired and your brain can no longer regulate your mood, you can go the opposite by starting to feel very sad and eventually feeling depressed. Secondly, physical. I don't think I need to explain much about that. Physical refers to you being physically so tired that you, for example, cannot get out of bed. And then lastly, mental exhaustion. Mental exhaustion refers to our cognitive ability. In other words, our ability to make rational and logical decisions. And when you're so exhausted that you can no longer make rational decisions, you could be suffering from burnout. So let's look at some practical examples of how you would feel when you're suffering from burnout. First of all, you might have a sense of feeling overwhelmed. In other words, everything just becomes too much. Making decisions, getting out of bed every morning, being in a good mood, it just all seems too much. You feel overwhelmed. Unable to meet demands. Remember that our work, our friends, our partner, our children, everybody around us makes certain demands on us, however big or small that might be. Of course, if you're suffering from burnout, that means that you've been working for too long and too hard. So especially demands at work would feel just too much, and you would be able to meet those demands. Remember what I said about feeling emotionally exhausted and eventually you could develop depression? Well, this is what we call a sense of helplessness or hopelessness. And a sense of being cynical also falls under this category. People that feel depressed often report that they feel hopeless and helpless. They feel that they can't do anything about their situation and that there's no hope for the future. They also tend to be very pessimistic and negative. In other words, being cynical. So people suffering from burnout could develop a very negative mood, aka feeling depressed. And then very lastly, people suffering from burnout tend to be resentful towards others and their work. Remember, if you're suffering from burnout, it could be that either you have your own company or you're working for a company, but that you've been working too hard and too long. So of course you're going to start to feel resentful towards the source of your burnout. In other words, your company or the company you work for. You also start to feel resentful towards the people at your work and eventually the people closest to you. So when it comes to burnout, there's certain signs that we can look out for. First of all, there's physical signs. For example, feeling tired most of the time. In other words, as we discussed, it seems that nothing you can do will make you feel energetic again. Doesn't matter how much you sleep or how much you try to relax, it seems that you're always tired. Secondly, you become frequently sick. If you feel burned out, your immune system could become compromised, and therefore you could become a lot more sick than usual. Then thirdly, frequently developing headaches and muscle pain. There's a lot of stress that's associated with burnout, and stress is the main cause when it comes to these type of headaches and muscle pain. And then lastly, change in appetite and sleeping patterns. So what we mean by this is people that suffer from burnout tend to either eat less or eat more, or either tend to sleep a lot, or sometimes they are so anxious that they cannot sleep at all and they become insomnic. In other words, they suffer from insomnia. So you can see that suffering from burnout can cause havoc on your body. So the second type of sign we can be looking out for when it comes to burnout is emotional. In other words, feeling like a failure. A lot of people that suffer from burnout report that they feel like a failure, that there's no hope, and we've spoken about that as well, a sense of hopelessness. Also a sense of feeling alone. In other words, it seems that nobody can support you or nobody can help you, and you feel very alone and isolated. Then also a loss of motivation. If you're suffering from burnout, you're no longer motivated to do anything or the things you used to do. And then lastly, feeling negative and cynical. And we've already discussed this. People that suffer from burnout seems to be pessimistic all the time. Everything is just what they observe as negative, and they're very cynical about everything around them. And then the last type of sign you should be looking out for is behavioral signs. In other words, what we do. So here we talk about withdrawing from your responsibilities. In other words, we all have certain responsibilities to do in life, especially at work. And when you start to withdraw from your responsibilities, in other words, abdicating your responsibility or giving up your responsibility, that is usually a good sign of burnout. Isolating yourself, we've discussed this already. If you're suffering from burnout, you don't have the energy to engage with people around you. So you'd rather be alone so that you don't need to expend any more energy engaging with other people. Then also taking longer to get things done. In other words, things that should be simple or things that you're usually quick to do, now it takes longer and longer for you to finish those tasks. Then also using substances to cope. A lot of people suffering from burnout tend to turn to things like smoking and alcohol and drugs to help them cope with the burnout. For example, where you might drink 1 glass of wine per night, now you might drink a whole bottle or even 2 bottles just to cope with the feeling of burnout. Becoming angry with others. People that suffer from burnout tend to be very frustrated with the people around them. And they also seem to be very angry with themselves. Remember, we spoke about a sense of being a failure. And they tend to take out their frustrations and their anger on the people around them. And then lastly, avoiding the workplace. As we've also discussed earlier, the workplace is the source of your burnout. So it makes sense that you would want to avoid the workplace. In other words, somebody that suffers from burnout would book off more and more sick, put in more and more leave, do anything to avoid the workplace. So let's look at exactly what causes burnout. Well, first of all, let's look at some work-related causes of burnout. Firstly, a feeling like you have little or no control over your work. And that is probably the number one cause of burnout, is a lack of control. Once you feel overwhelmed at work and you feel that you have no control over the amount of work that you're doing or the actual work that you're doing, that will definitely lead to burnout. Secondly, a lack of recognition or reward for good work. Sometimes people put in the extra time and extra effort to do a really good job, but they are never recognized for it nor rewarded for it. This can also lead to burnout. Then thirdly, unclear or overly demanding job expectations. This is also one of the root causes of burnout. When you don't quite understand what you have to do in your job, when there's no clear instructions, in other words, what you have to do. And then lastly, doing work that's monotonous and unchallenging. So what we mean by monotonous is work that you do over and over and over again, and there's no change, there's nothing that challenges you. So for example, factory workers might suffer from burnout as they do the same task day in and day out over and over. But it's also true for more corporate workers. For example, somebody that works in an administrative position and that is so well versed in, for example, doing the salaries every month that it becomes monotonous for them. They do the same thing over and over, and there's nothing that challenges them or develops them. Then also certain personality types or personality traits can lead to burnout. For example, somebody that's perfectionistic. This person needs to do the task over and over again until it's perfect in their mind. Unfortunately, there is no such thing as perfect, and so this person will continue with the task over and over again until it comes to as close as perfection as they think it can be. But that takes a lot of effort. Then you also get the pessimistic person out there, people that are always very negative about themselves in the world, and so they will also tend to be very negative about themselves in the workplace and feel that they cannot do what they're supposed to do in the workplace. They will also undervalue themselves all the time. Then thirdly, the need to be in control and reluctant to abdicate work to others. So what we mean by this is people that feel that they always have to be in control will never give up some of the work to other people. But if you're working in a company, or even if you have your own company, you have to share the workload with other people. And if you feel that you need to be in control and you need to do all the work yourself, then obviously you're going to start to feel the effects of burnout. And then lastly, we're talking about your high achieving type A personality. In other words, people that always have to be the best at everything. They always have to succeed no matter what. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of effort, a huge amount of effort, to always be number one, to always be achieving. And eventually, you could suffer from burnout because you simply cannot cope with the amount of workload that you're dealing with. So let's quickly look at some severe consequences of burnout. First of all, insomnia. Insomnia is a terrible condition that you can develop. In other words, people that sleep 1 to 3 hours a day. And this can have a severe impact not just on your body but on your mind as well. Alcohol or substance abuse. A large proportion of people that suffer from burnout sometimes turn out to become alcoholics or drug addicts. Why? Because the more burned out they feel, the more they turn to substances to cope. But then in the end they become addicts. Heart disease. Heart disease is very common when it comes to burnout. And a lot of the time burnout can lead to something like a heart attack. High blood pressure. Once again, a lot of stress causes high blood pressure, and this could lead to something like a stroke, for example. Type 2 diabetes, which is also quite a severe condition to develop. And then lastly, vulnerability to illness. If you're suffering from burnout, and I'm talking about severe burnout, it could take several years, like at least 2 to 3 years for you to fully recover from that burnout. And in that time, your immune system is compromised, and some people develop quite severe illnesses. So what can we do to combat burnout? In other words, what are the strategies that we can engage in to cope with burnout? Well, first of all, limit your contact with negative people. In the previous videos, we've spoken about a positive attitude, but positivity can be a great counter for burnout. If you surround yourself with negative people, obviously you will become negative yourself. In other words, surround yourself with positive people so that you can feel positive about yourself and positive about your work. Secondly, try to find some value in your work. If you feel overwhelmed or if you feel confused about what you're supposed to do in your job, find something that you are competent in. Find some value even in the smallest part of what you do at your work. Thirdly, find balance in your life. In the next video, we're going to be talking all about balancing your life. Fourthly, take time off. This is so important. Don't be that person that always says, no, I'm going to work through Easter or I'm going to work through Christmas while the others are on holiday. Make sure that you take time off for yourself. once again, to find that balance between work life and personal life. Set boundaries. This goes hand in hand with the previous statement. It's very, very important that there's a clear distinction between your personal life and your work life. Don't let the two blend into each other. A good example is don't ever try to bring work home. Sometimes that's not always possible, but don't make it the norm. Don't have it that you're always working when you get home from work and you're sitting at home, that you're still working. Set very clear boundaries. Then take a daily break from technology. Why am I saying that? Technology is something that keeps our brain going. And if you're at work, it's very important that, as we've said before, that you're cognitively alert. In other words, that your brain is alert to make certain decisions. That is what work is about. And so if you get home in the afternoon or at night and you're on your tablet or on your cell phone, you keep your brain going and your brain never shuts off. That could lead to burnout. So try and take a daily break from technology, where you're not watching video, where you're not on your tablet or your phone, where you're spending time with friends or family or your partner, just chatting. Then nourish your creative side. In the next video, we will be discussing all about being creative and how important that is. But being creative is a great outlet for stress. Then set aside relaxation time. This kind of coincides with taking a break from technology. So make a space in your day, even if it's just an hour, where you simply relax, whether it's playing with your pets, spending time with your partner, or spending time with friends, family, your children, whatever gets you to relax. But it's so important that relaxation doesn't coincide with technology. And then get enough exercise. I think that goes without saying. We will discuss in the next video the connection between body and mind, but as the saying goes, a healthy body houses a healthy mind. And then lastly, get enough sleep. And this is very, very important, and I've mentioned this several times already. But getting enough sleep is not just important for your body to recuperate, but also for your brain to recuperate. And remember what we said, one of the consequences of burnout is insomnia, not getting enough sleep. So sleep is not just important for your body to heal itself, but also for your brain to help to regulate your mood. Hence, sleep is very, very important.